when we started the FXB Climate Advocates Program, we had just about 10 young people in New York. And I really didn't know that. I could have never imagined that just really 3-4 years later, we would have such a global and diverse cohort, that we would be adding hundreds of young people to our global network. And just how impressive and inspiring it is to meet all of you and work with all of you. So it's really wonderful. Our first cohort took place in the fall of 21, so really just 2 years ago, and it had 20 students. And now we have cohorts of almost 100 students from 50 countries. So the program has really grown, but we also know that there are many more young people who may not be able to access our program because of technology or English language or other barriers. So we are, actively thinking about how to make this more accessible to more young people who may not have sort of the advantages such as, computer and Wi-Fi and all these things to sign on to our sessions. So without further ado, let's get started. Thank you, Joy, for your beautiful comment. So I'm going to share my screen. We're gonna do a number of things today. And we do have an alumni coming to speak with us. We hope that you have enjoyed the program. Let me just see before, he's not here yet. So yeah, it's really exciting to watch the program grow and expand over the years. And we really rely on our program participants and alumni to help us spread the word. Yesterday, I recorded a podcast for Bolo Foundation, and they asked me, how did you expand the program from, participants in one city to youth from 50 countries? And I said that without any marketing budget or any paid advertisement or anything like that, the best champions of our program were the program participants. And I'm really just humbled to see how the program has grown just based on word of mouth from our FXB Climate Advocates participant. You take the program, you recommend it to others, they recommend it to others. And that's actually how our program has grown. In fact, our alumni, Dhruv Bhatt, who's going to present to you today, thanks to him, he recommended a program to a colleague in another initiative focused on oceans. And this colleague is from Kazakhstan. And because of her, she took our program and then she recommended it to others. And now we have, for the first time, Central Asia represented in the program across different countries in Central Asia. So this is how we rely on you to be our champions for our program, to recommend it to others, to share with others, and to help grow this incredible network of youth advocates. So please, I'll be sharing, and I'll be sharing materials about our Spring 24 cohort so that you could share it with your friends, your family, the climate organizations you're involved with. And as always, you're always welcome to repeat the cohort because, every cohort is slightly different. You can never stop learning. And we've had participants complete 2 or 3 cohorts as well. So you're more than welcome to repeat because there's always, there's no limit to learning. But as you know, in almost every session, we invite a program alumni to share about their experiences, their climate story, their experiences with our program, as well as the work that they're doing on the ground and how our program really helped impact or improve that work. So without further ado, today I'm going to introduce you to Dhruv Bhatt, a young man from India, who will share with us a little bit about his climate advocacy work so you could see how alumni are taking action in their communities and globally. Dhruv, over to you. Dhruv, do you need me to share, make you a co-host?
Hi, Karina. Yeah,
Hi.
that would be.
Yeah, let me see, make you co-host. Okay. Great. Welcome, Dhruv. Thank you so much for taking time to meet with the Fall 23 participants. It's our last formal session together, which is really sad, but I think you'll be very inspiring to show what happens after the program and the incredible work that you can do after completing this program. So over to you, Dhruv.
So again, thank you, Karina, and hello to everyone who's in this wonderful session. I didn't know that this was the last session, but I hope that you have really great journeys after this. So I'm Dhruv Bhatt, as Karina introduced. I'm 18 and I'm a climate justice and child rights activist. Today I'll share a bit about my project, uh, the project that I presented as part of my FXB Climate Advocate program in fall of 2022. So almost more than a year ago. And I hope that this project will inspire you to keep developing your projects as well as your journey as an FXB climate advocate alum. So let's just dive right in. Before I start about my climate story, I want to share about the context that I come from. So this is my state, Uttarakhand. You can see all the beautiful hills. You can see the lakes. This is a very climate vulnerable state. Despite all of the natural beauty, it's also really prone to it warms faster than India on average, which leads to a lot of flash floods. There's also seasonal rain that leads to landslides. So this is a state where culture and identity are deeply tied, and with some of India's most sacred religious sites, including the source of the rivers Ganga or Ganges, as it's known outside of India, and Yamuna, a state, particularly the remote pilgrimage sites, are dependent upon ecotourism, which plays again a huge part of economy. And national parks have the highest density of tigers in India and several other vulnerable endemic species of plants and animals called the Himalayas of my state home. So every year and throughout the year, millions of tourists visit my state to marvel at its hills, national parks, and temples and lakes. But what the tourists don't see is this: floods, forests, fires, and deaths. In 2013 alone, there was a terrible flood which was aggravated by climate change that took the life of 6,000 people and trapped 300,000 people in my state without access to electricity, food, and sometimes even a safe shelter. The situation was so dire that when help arrived, the rescue team was not able to recognize the different locations simply because there was no sign of life left there. In 2021, again, a high altitude dam collapsed, which damaged the surrounding ecosystem permanently. And even on a smaller scale, in every single year, there are forest fires, there are landslides, there's increased conflict with wildlife such as tigers, and higher than average rainfall, which lead to school closures for days, and parents engage their children in domestic or agricultural work instead because they do not see the value in education, or sometimes it's just to make ends meet. All this is while a government continues to overdevelop already vulnerable and sinking lands, and governments worldwide refuse to meet their ever ambitious net zero promises. This is what I have grown up seeing even before I knew about the concept of climate change, the science behind it. But this isn't an isolated or exceptional experience. If you look at the different sources, such as the UNICEF Children's Climate Index, you can look it up. It suggests that almost every child around the world faces some sort of direct impact of climate change and environmental degradation. So the crisis may manifest itself as floods, it may manifest itself as lung disease, as air pollution, as malaria. There are many ways that children around the world are facing the impacts of climate change. So when I was around 11 or 12 years old, I really wanted to act in whatever capacity. But despite the vulnerable state of my region, our schools do the bare minimum to actually teach about climate education, about climate science and its impact on social inequality, for example, in schools. They do the very bare minimum because they're mandated by law to teach about climate science. But it's neither holistic nor is it a very solution oriented experience. And that was my main motivation behind joining this program because I wanted to build my capacity uh, around the various nuances of climate change and particularly the session on climate lobbying that I really enjoyed. And through my learnings in the program, I got the idea of, taking this one step forward. I know that, climate change impacts children, but how can I make a difference in this? How can I make children more aware by participating in the various programs, including, the climate storytelling sessions? I that really inspired me to. Oh, am I audible?
Yeah, has everyone been able to hear? Have others been able to hear? I just
Yes, I can hear everyone.
okay, others were able to hear. Okay, so it must just be on Altina's computer. Go ahead, Dhruv.
Yeah. So so that's what really inspired me to initiate a project around child rights, understanding the intersection of child rights and climate justice, right? And this has led me to, so there's this project, I name it as a project, but it's actually it diversified into so many different things, including creative writing, including peer mentorship. I'll share some of it with you today in this. So one of the ways that I uh, explore and make aware children about the climate crisis is through creative writing. Because I feel, and my friends often say this, that they would rather read a story or a poem on climate change than the IPCC report, right? All of many of the climate research that is available is simply not very accessible. It's not very creative, and it fails to engage children and even adults with diverse needs. So if you look at this poem, this is about casteism and water insecurity in India. And in this poem, I write from the perspective of the body of water itself, because I believe that water can be a very um, significant mirror to how society works. In India, casteism often leads to segregation of water resources. So people from the lower caste, so-called lower caste, are not allowed to access the same water resources as the higher caste. And due to climate change and due to drying up of water resources that are already overused, this often leads to water scarcity. And in this poem, basically, a person from a lower caste has to steal water. When you think about water, and it's almost something that we take for granted, but there are people out there that don't have access to it. And in this poem, I try to explain that. I try to explore the nuances of social inequality and how it impacts the real life of people. Another example is this excerpt from an essay that I wrote on the climate injustices in Indian slums. This 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 story slash letter slash essay is is addresses the topic of why addressing social inequality can help address the climate crisis. In this essay, my challenge was to portray the complex, multidimensional social inequality in Indian slums, such as intergenerational, educational, caste-based, and financial inequality in a way that profoundly impacts the reader. So I decided to write it from the perspective of a child who's living in this world that is restricted to the slum. And you can notice that through the words such as letting, choked, infinite darkness, and underbelly, I recover the lived experiences of these children that oftentimes when we read reports, XYZ percentage of children live in XYZ conditions, you are not able to imagine and picture their realities. But through creative writing, and especially writing that is intended for children, we can recover we can rehumanize these victims of climate. I have a lot, but I know that I'm a little short on time. So another way is that I write blogs on different climate issues, such as this blog about why the climate crisis is a child rights crisis, why environmental activists around the world are facing increased violence from governments and corporations. or simply this poem about the on the topic of the funny thing about climate change, which is just a humorous way of thinking about climate change in a very different light, away from the pessimistic, alarmist communication that we see. I after I completed the my FXB climate advocacy program, I worked on a climate resource list. I know that FXB USA also has a really nice climate resource list, but I also worked on a different one where I consolidated all of the different resources that I had into again uh, a presentation that was shared widely to children, and I think till date has reached more than 150 children. I also worked on I also work with an ocean-based organization that Karina was talking about, where I share use creative art pieces such as these. All of these were created by children and teens. So I use them to explain about climate change, and you can look at how creatively the concept of climate of how of biological degradation around the world, or the concept of pollution is expressed here. I also worked on a policy brief on justice for children and understanding how the different SDGs, such as SDG 16.3, intersects with the concept of justice intersects with environmental crisis, but also with social inequality. I worked with the Office of the Special Representative on Violence Against Children to understand why climate change increases violence against children and what different forms this can take. So again, I started with a very diverse, like a very vague topic, which was just the intersection of child rights and climate justice, but it evolved into all of these different projects. And again, this is another example of how climate change can aggravate social inequality and impact children. So in my community, as well as in Nepal, I know that in some other parts of the world, menstrual untouchability is practiced. So menstruators, but primarily women and girls who, while menstruating, they're separated from their families. They're forced to live in a small hut outside of their house, sometimes quite away from their house. And when you think about this in the context of climate change, for example, this this takes on a different form of abuse because many of them have to live through really harsh, extreme events and climate change doesn't really help that, right? Many of them have gender-based roles, such as collecting water, for which they have to drop out of schools. They do not have access to eco-friendly menstrual products. So this was an issue, and I was able to impact change in this issue by mentoring projects, menstrual justice projects in Nepal and Nigeria. You can look at the projects here. And a piece of advice for anyone who's also starting a project is that one of the things that really helps to make a project more impactful is community analysis. So the first thing that I did with these different projects, be it here in Nepal or this one in Nigeria, was just reaching out to different stakeholders, including the menstruators themselves, non-menstruators, tailors, school teachers, and understanding what are the stigmas uh, that kind of promote that kind of increase the conflict between menstruators and non-menstruators or lead to menstruators losing their rights. And then we develop creative methodologies. For example, in Nepal, we developed a project, a school-based campaign called Blooming Red, where the members of the team went to different schools. They hosted seminars for different girls and boys, and they also hosted workshops for pad making, which is like recyclable pad making. And right now, they are even in Nigeria, we worked with tailors to upcycle textile waste into reusable menstrual pad. So even now, they are working with women in their communities to actually market this product to different communities and even outside their communities as a it's an alternate source of income um, for women. And you can see how this project that it started just as an awareness program, but then they really looked into what their community needs and kind of tweaked their solution to meet their actual needs that led to all of these different partnerships and progress. I also worked on different research, including understanding how what children want to talk about, what children want from policymakers, what is the future of policymaking around concepts like environment, peace, and digital decision making. And I presented this project at the Global Futures Forum at the UN, New York. And again, and throughout this journey, I've come across so many different organizations, and I would definitely say that having that FXB Climate Advocates experience, just having that on my resume, that was something that was actually discussed in my interviews. They were excited to know what I did in the program. So not only is this a really nice capacity building program, a really nice way to network with peers, but it can also really help you when you apply to other programs or other opportunities. These are some of the organizations that I work with. COVID-19, this is the Future Blue Youth Council. My term is sadly coming to an end at the end of this month. I work with the Trust for Sustainable Living as well, and obviously the FXB Climate Program. That is all from me about my project. But I shared a piece of advice. Another advice that I would share that was a common theme throughout the different projects that I led was just finding creative ways to engage youth and children, right? You, as young people, we can be storytellers, we can be poets, we can be essay writers, we can research, we can write policy briefs. So whenever you're thinking about your project, think about how you communicate it in an action-oriented and accessible way so that you can reach more people. And just pitch your idea. I apply to as many opportunities as I can. Sometimes I have to turn them down, but I apply to all of these because the climate space, sometimes it feels like being disconnected or shouting into an empty room. But if you connect, if you network with different individuals, if you find different groups that you can align with, that always helps you to develop your ideas. Working with all of these different organizations and different projects, sometimes outside of my country, has really helped me to understand what I want to do next in my own journey as an activist. And it would be impossible for me to achieve what I have, including like representing at the UN, representing at the House of Commons, working with different experts, child rights experts, human rights experts. This would be impossible if I did not have the support of mentors like Karina and organizations like FXB USA, as well as the FXB USA alumni group. So I really do hope that you check that out once you graduate today. And yeah, that's all from me. Feel free to reach out to me. I can share my LinkedIn in the chat if you have any questions. But yeah, that's all from me.